It's so easy to just almost build a wall around yourself and your emotions and hold it in and find something else that takes your mind off of it. I guess I buried it.
Be Inspired podcast. Real stories from real people. Sharing stories of love and loss, struggles and perseverance, laughter and tears, and overcoming adversity.
The loss of a child is an unspeakable tragedy. Imagine having to endure this tragedy multiple times in one's lifetime. Hi, I'm Bert Barron.
And I'm Lisa Anderson.
And we welcome you to a very special Be Inspired. Lisa, I'm interested and intrigued by the guests that are on the program here today, and I know it's something that you have a common bond with them as a parent who lost a child. But to have this happen to them more than one time in their lifetime, there are fewer things in life that are more tragic than the loss of a child.
Yeah, I actually, sadly, am familiar with both. Having lost two sons, one full term at birth, and my oldest suddenly. So I understand both ends of the spectrum, really. It's something that kind of can be uncomfortable to talk about, so I'm glad we can have our guests on today to kind of share with some folks who may have gone through that.
We welcome John and Donna Thain to the Be Inspired set, and welcome. It's really an honor to have you both here today. To what we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so is not an easy thing for any parent to talk about, and to have the two of you here together, I think, is special and very inspiring. I guess every good story that is worth telling starts at the beginning. So, John or Donna, would you like to kind of take us back to the beginning of the story that you're going to share today?
Well, the beginning of the story is the birth of my first child, Lauren, which was a typical pregnancy, an extraordinary delivery, 7 hours for my first, and a beautiful baby girl who was perfectly healthy. So all that being said, why not do it again? And so that's what we did. The pregnancy was pretty typical. I had less morning sickness, but it was a typical pregnancy, a relatively typical delivery, labor and delivery. Do you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah. I have to admit, we both sat here before we recorded and wondered why we were sitting here having this discussion, but I'm glad we are. When Ashley was born, almost a year after Lauren was born, everything was great. It was right before the holidays. She was born. She was beautiful. She was healthy. All of her scores and so forth at birth were wonderful. And we took her home, and we were getting ready for the holidays. And we noticed that she was flexing her hand and squeezing her hand, and ended up taking her to our pediatrician, who oddly enough was the father of a high school classmate of ours. And immediately he said, I'm not sure what's going on here, but let's get to St. Christopher's Hospital for Children. And then that started 4.5 months of endless testing and infection and illness and just I don't even know how to describe it other than it was 4.5 months of frustration, fear, just every emotion you can think of ran through your...
It's every parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And as I look at your faces, that had to be quite a number of years ago, and it just is beneath the surface. I remember someone saying to me, where we could be smiling on the outside, but you just scratch the surface and there is all the pain and there are all the tears. And it's just so devastating that I don't think we learn to cope. It's something we never get over. And some people say, well, you have other children, be happy. And yes, we do, and we are blessed. However, that sort of loss never goes away. And as new parents, I can imagine, you know, the nervousness and the scaredness you must have experienced going through that. What was the ultimate outcome?
The ultimate outcome was the doctors, Ashley died on March 21st of '85. It was the course of the disease. They didn't have any answers for us. They said it was probably a spontaneous mutation of a gene that we somehow shared, which was also unlikely, given our backgrounds, but not to worry. It's 1 in a million chance it'll happen again. If you want to have more kids, go ahead. And subsequently, I had another pregnancy, and the course of the disease was exactly the same.
It's to have to go through that another time almost seems surreal. And the fact that you went through the 9 months and saw this child and loved this child and planned a future for this child is devastating, and we're so sorry that you had to endure that.
You know, one of the things that I think is kind of important to point out, we just didn't hope that things were going to be better. I mean, we took extraordinary steps. You know, Donna's brother, my brother-in-law Lee, was an OBGYN and was well known in the industry and was able to connect us with some of the top doctors in the profession. In fact, we got a nationally renowned doctor that Donna was under the care of, Francis Hutchins, and you know, we knew that we had taken extraordinary steps. Tissue samples were sent to hospitals and, you know, information banks and so forth around the world to try to find any common thread or any other case. And, you know, after almost 2 years, well, after a year and a half, when nothing was discovered, that's when it was, you know, it was just an unfortunate thing we can't explain,
Right.
and go ahead and do it again. And I'll never forget when we showed up at St. Christopher's the second time. We had a fabulous doctor there, Warren Grover, and he was as clinical as can be, very unemotional, but he just made you feel terrific in that he was just so working so hard to figure out what the answers were. But I remember when we walked in, he said, you know, I think we've made a determination, and it's going to stand really stupid for me to say this, but this is a genetic problem. And it's like, well, I hope we're not paying for this diagnosis.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it went from, you know, 1 in a million chance to 1 in 4 with every pregnancy.
Wow. And at this point, you just had your daughter,
Yes.
and then went on to have a boy.
Yes.
After that.
Jake was, well, 13 years later.
Okay.
13
That took
years after Lauren.
Quite some time, and understandably. Yeah. I mean, for any family who has to go through this, I think it changes your dynamic forever. Would you say that?
That's maybe an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly did. I think, and Donna and I dealt with it in very different ways. And I know we tried to do the right things. We went to grief counseling, had 2 grief counselors that we weren't really enamored with, and finally found a guy that I really connected with. And we went 3 times, and I'm like, boy, I really feel like I'm getting something out of this. And on the 3rd visit, he said, you know, I've got some really great news and some not so great news. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And he goes, you know, the great news is I got a job in Canada, and the bad news is I can't be your grief therapist anymore. And I think at that point, we both just kind of said, we're going to have to deal with this on our own.
Yeah. It's very apparent that men and women grieve differently, and that can either bring you closer together or, in your case, unfortunately, do you feel that was the reason that your marriage ended?
No, I don't think that that had anything to do with why the marriage ended, but the years before the marriage ended, they were lost years. They were just lost years. He dealt with it in one way, and I dealt with it in another way, and we ultimately drifted apart.
Yeah.
But I don't think that probably brought to our attention how differently we dealt with things in
Right.
general.
Right. And you could say that most marriages fall apart with a death of a child
Oh,
if there were.
absolutely. The nurses prepared
statistics.
me for it.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's very common. And if there were problems before, it just exacerbates the problems. And you just, like you said, drift further and further
Right.
apart.
Right.
What would you say to couples right now who are struggling with this issue and feel the way that you both felt back when this happened?
I mean, I would say communicate.
Talk to each other.
It's so easy to just almost build a wall around yourself and your emotions and hold it in and find something else that takes your mind off of it. You know, for me, I worked. You know, I at the time we lived in Philadelphia. I had an office in New York, and I was in, you know, I was out of the home 12 hours a day. During those 4.5 months, I'd often come home and spend 2 or 3 hours in the hospital trying to speak to doctors and so forth. But, you know, I guess I buried it. And, you know, there were people that I worked with. At the time, I was a vice president of sales, and I traveled around the country quite a bit, although not when the kids were in the hospital. And there were reps that worked for me in other parts of the country that had no idea that anything had happened, and you know, and I kept it that way. I needed the break of someone not asking me, how are the kids doing, or what's going on.
Yeah.
And there were many people that I was very close with that lived distances away that didn't find out until, you know, long after.
So, Donna, if John immersed himself in his work as a way of coping with the losses, what did you do to find some comfort in this period of your life?
I had Lauren at home that I had to, my eldest daughter, and I, you know, took care of her. I also took jobs that I didn't need to take,
Just to keep busy.
just to keep busy.
Right. Is this the first time you guys are coming together to speak about this?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Oddly enough, yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I think I always knew. I didn't need John to tell me that he threw himself into his work. I knew that he did, and I assumed that he knew that I was overzealous about taking care of poor Lauren, who probably has suffered as a result of this from an overprotective mom. But I think we both knew how we were coping with it.
Yeah. And now, with your 2 children, they see both of you and they realize, you know, why things happen. If you guys want to come up here. I know it's emotional because I too was overprotective as well, so I understand.
And
This
this is Jake
Jake
and Lauren.
and Lauren.
Wow.
Great looking kids.
Yeah.
How do you feel right now, listening to your mom and dad's story?
I love seeing this. And they get to talk about something they haven't gotten to talk to and they talk about for quite a long time. And I feel like it's like a good release as well as helpful to a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. Lauren?
Yeah, I agree with Jake. It's a long time coming. I think there have been lots of conversations about what had happened over the years, but this is very cathartic and meaningful for everyone to talk about it.
It's so nice to see the support. And John, you're remarried?
I am, yes.
And that,
Mary Pat, and she's actually here today.
well, she can come on up too? She's good. And did you remarry?
I did not.
Okay, so you all get along? Because I saw you all talking
Yeah.
before we got on, and that's nice. That's a great part of it. You seem to be all really close. What would you guys say to someone out there listening to, if you see your family fragmented because of something like this, what does that do in your life?
Well, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's important and good for everyone to sort of heed the warnings that are laced in this story, which is not to be disconnected from your loved ones and try to make yourself more uncomfortable than not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grief is such a personal journey, too. It really is. And there's no right or wrong way. I could see a lot of pain in your eyes, John. A lot of pain in Lauren's, too. And I know you get your strength from your children who are here.
13 years later, when Jake came along, I just knew in my heart that it was the right, that I was going to go forward, everything was going to be okay, and sure enough it was.
Yeah, a mother can feel that in her heart. Absolutely.
Is it okay to say that a father was terrified?
It
Sure.
was terrified, but I
Absolutely.
knew it was going to be okay.
Yeah, rightfully so. It's nice to see.
This is a special group of people that we're with today, Lisa. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for telling your story. It's not easy. And we thank you for just allowing people into your life, that it's a subject that does not get talked about enough, especially infants. And it's, forever painful. And we have to learn to deal with it every single day. And it also teaches us, I think, to hold on to what's important, really hold on. And all the other stuff just kind of fades away.
It's interesting. I guess I've learned long after, and I think I don't know whether it's an American situation or what, but we don't know how to grieve. We really don't. I think, countries, where there isn't such a melting pot, there's a way to grieve, maybe in Italy
Yep.
or in the Middle East or whatever. And I think there's so many people from so many places, we tend to just, it's behind me, or
Wrap it up in a box.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, you're supposed to feel a little bit of pain. You're supposed to,
lot
put
of
it out there, and you're supposed to let it come out. And I know I didn't. And I hope anybody else who goes through this situation really works to confront the pain, the sorrow, and the grief that something like this brings.
I agree, 100%. Yeah,
Thank
we
you
need
for
to
the
learn.
opportunity.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, we thank you all for being here, that's for sure. I'm Bert Barron,
And I'm Lisa Anderson.
and we thank you for joining us on Be Inspired.
I'm Donna Thain, and I hope that my coming on the show today will help people learn how to cope with their tragedies if they've lost a loved one.
I'm John Thain, and I came on to Be Inspired really to share the message and hopefully inspire other people to really make sure they take care of themselves if they go through an experience like this, and to work at it. And for me, it was also kind of a chance to do a do-over. I didn't do a really good job of confronting my grief when this occurred, and I've tried to do so since then, and really haven't had a chance to share my thoughts with Donna, with Lauren, or with Jake, and this was an opportunity to do so. So hopefully it helps someone out there, and so hopefully it helps us as well.
Next on Be Inspired.
My feet were turned in like that when I was younger. Most doctors told her, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chansky, there's really nothing to do. Paul will never be able to learn to walk." I had achieved a victory, a small achievement in learning how to walk. We could overcome any challenge and overcome any obstacle. I didn't want to write a book unless my story could help other people. People can change when we become educated about the differences we all share. And when you're smiling, nobody ever teases you because you're projecting optimism. You are projecting hope. Nobody can be you better than you are. You are so inspiring. You are a gift to others.
Be Inspired with your hosts Bert Barron and Lisa Anderson Puleo. Directed by Rod Weber. Created and produced by Michael R. Doyle. Co-producers Bert Barron, Lisa Anderson Puleo, Rebecca Gruber, and Erwin Sternberg. Executive producers Rod Weber and Sean M. Sternberg. Editor Rebecca Gruber. Filmed at New Beginnings Foundation, Wall Township, New Jersey. Season 5 of Be Inspired is dedicated to the memory of Golden Boy Michael Cammett. Michael was a rising star in the world of professional wrestling who died in a tragic accident this past summer. His memory and legacy live on in the lives he touched, and he will always be remembered by family, friends, and fans.